Wargamers special episode. We were Thronesers. We were Westerosi. We were HBOers.
We were probably murdered in the many wars that happened in this TV show.
we died at the Battle of Winterfell.
Or any of the other battles in the many subsequent seasons.
Or in the,
previous seasons?
Wait, where other places we could have died before we go there. Spoiler warning for Game of Thrones, all of it.
Yeah, I will consider myself a big lore fan of this show. If you're ready to be spoiled in every aspect of HBO, books,
yeah.
fan theories, ideas, I'm going to talk about a lot of it.
Good.
So get ready for that.
Good.
And if you're somehow a person who hasn't seen the show and you're listening to this anyway, okay. We're assuming you've seen the show, though.
Right. We're
not necessarily going to explain everything up to now.
Right. So this will be our Game of Thrones special that was hinted at in episodes previous. We haven't talked about Game of Thrones in a while, JJ. We kind of said we were going to leave it until the end.
And what an end it was. But we'll get there later, I think.
Yeah. Today I thought about this podcast a lot. And I thought about season 8, which is the one that just ended. And the things I would want to say and where the story left us and all the characters we've spent years with and everything else along those lines. And I just kept ending up with questions and more questions and frustrations. And I was glad we didn't talk about it along the way because we would have been frustrated with a lot of things because we didn't know where they were ending up. And also you end up on the internet and you start reading gross fan reactions. And I didn't want to be one of those people that was just angry.
And, in the moment, I feel some of those people's pain.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it, especially where some of the cuts are in this season, it's very obvious where the various endings of the various arcs are. There is a lot to be desired.
less. This happened less with Lost, I guess, but I felt the same. Like at the end of Lost, I didn't have any questions. I was just like, okay, well, it's over.
Yeah, I guess I still had quite a few questions at the end of Lost, but it was more like, okay, I see what they went for here. I don't like this, but this is what they wanted to do, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I was in a similar headspace at the end of this, I would have to say. And so all day thinking up to this podcast, I was a little down, man. I didn't know where to go or what to do or where to start with all this. So help me out, brother.
Well, why don't we start at the beginning of season 8 anyway?
So I was going to say, okay, Ned Stark.
Right, so there's Ned Stark and this family, and they find these wolves, and
the wolves.
We're just going to leave all that. Yeah, we're going to come back to that. Let's leave all that aside. We're going to start at the beginning of season 8, right?
Let's talk about symbolism for a second. Hold on. Wolves represent the protection of the North. Oh, God.
The dog just wanted to be pet.
Where did all the symbolism go in season 8? Season 7, even.
I mean, all right. So, let's
lead us on, man. Lead us on.
Let's start at the beginning. Where were we when the season opens, right?
Right.
So, it had actually kind of took me a while to remember where we were here.
Okay.
I kind of, because I didn't go back and rewatch any of the episodes before this. So, or really much of season 7 at all. So I kind of didn't remember where exactly we had left everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So thankfully, the previously on Game of Thrones is there to kind of remind you, here's what's important. And I kind of think it's a theme. Anything that doesn't get brought up on those previously on things may as well have never happened.
I mean, it was true starting season 4 or 5. I think that if the season led in without mentioning stuff from the previous season, it was just going to get left undone.
There was one instance this entire season of a callback to an earlier season that I thought was really good. Never again. And that was in the very last episode, or maybe the second to last one.
Oh, which one was that?
Jon mentions that, or is it Tyrion? I think Jon mentions to Tyrion that Maester Aemon had said love is the death of duty.
Oh, yeah.
And that, I think, is the last episode, right? I think so.
Mhm.
Yeah, because Jon is in, because Tyrion is in prison, right?
Yeah,
That's
the
last one.
Tyrion says duty can be the death of love or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the only callback that I detected the entire season, and I thought it was a good one because that's like a nice like lineage of, oh hey, like, you know, this is something that happened way early on that kind of gives you a nice little foreshadowing almost of how this is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, nothing else was like that though. At the beginning of the season, we had the zombie fun time rescue raid to try and get Cersei to ally with us and bring a white to King's Landing so that people would listen and believe. And then people, for some reason, trusted Cersei after she has literally never upheld her end of anything ever, as far as I can tell, according to the story. And so we start with Jon and Dany and all of them marching their army into Winterfell, as though a very nice callback almost to the very first episode.
Right. Yeah. And we've got a dead dragon on the loose and an army that somehow moves at a snail's pace on the way, full of dead people.
An army that used the dead dragon to break down the wall and marched through at the end of the last season now has decided to like march both slowly and really fast at some times, depending on which episode we're in and whether we're trying to get this whole plot over with or not.
Maybe they were waiting to make sure that their whole army was there so they could get more dead for the undead army.
I guess. And you know, then you see the Night Watch. There's some people from the Night's Watch who didn't die, I guess. That's nice.
Mm-hmm.
Those people are ambushed in Last Hearth, which is one of those like northern towns north of Winterfell that you never really see again. And they leave some creepy art, and that's the end of episode 1.
Okay.
There was like some other stuff that happened in there, but like we never saw it again, so did it matter?
Okay.
Any opinions on the real early stuff here?
Odd that stuff took so long. You know, like
right.
We end up with such a rushed end of said season that like really the first part of this season should have started off real fast.
Yeah, especially when you consider, you know, yeah, exactly. The end arc of the season being amounts to 2 episodes, really, you know, maybe 2.5, 3. They could have pushed more of that into this first episode. And yeah, it's been 2 years since the show has been on. They got to remind everyone who everyone is. But like, dude, some of these episodes were literally 90 minutes or something. You could have done a little more character work here in episode 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then episode 2 is, hey guys, there's going to be a battle tomorrow. Let's use questionable military tactics and get ready for the battle.
Again, another episode that seems to move some characters forward, but also sideways, where you just sort of get the intrigue that Dany and Sansa are not going to get along.
Right. You get
Jon finds out about himself.
Right. And that's kind of the big, important revelation. Or it seems big at the time, doesn't it?
Sure does. Sure seems like
they had built up to it for a really long time.
A whole show's worth of foreshadowing, and it itself becoming a main plot line, what his lineage is, sure leads up to a big moment here. That
when right on the eve of the biggest battle in the history of the world, maybe, he uses it to get mad at his girlfriend? Or get his girlfriend mad at him, I guess. But never mind all this. We have to have a big battle scene, so let's talk about the big battle scene.
So that happens in episode 3?
3. Yep.
3.
It is the entirety of episode 3.
Right. From beginning
we talked
to
about
end. Yeah.
Questionable military tactics, and man, are there a lot of them on display here. From both sides, to be honest. Both teams have things that fly, but for whatever reason decide not to use them basically at all.
I think both teams were trying to wait to bait the other flying thing out. So you end up with, that part makes sense to me. You end up with the Night King winning the baiting them out, and because they're losing, so they need to get their dragons out, and then he shows up with his little magical winter storm. So that kind of makes a little bit sense to me. Meeting them outside the walls and just like riding your Dothraki to their death.
Well, but also, despite this episode making it look like literally every Dothraki dies, apparently not, because they show up again later in the season.
A lot of them.
Real also, questionable there.
Also looks like most of the Unsullied die when Grey Worm pulls the gate.
Die?
Yeah, and there's like more than ever at the end of this.
Yeah, real. Anyway, I don't know. That's just the way they shot it, I guess. I don't know. Let's talk about the big controversy that everyone had with this episode. Color balance.
Yeah, that's a black level thing. I watched this one twice. I don't rewatch a lot of Game of Thrones because I don't feel like I need to, considering having read the books, and then the later ones being very... After the books ended, the episodes became pretty straightforward in terms of they didn't add more characters. They just sort of started killing people off or writing them out.
And they didn't really layer the intrigue on that deep.
Right. They wrote out Dorne completely. There's a lot of stuff that just gets left undone. So I've never rewatched a Game of Thrones episode, and this was the only one I ever did because I watched it initially on a small screen due to traveling, and I wanted to watch it on my calibrated TV at home. Mm-hmm. And in a dark room with a backlight with your black level readjusted maybe from what a normal like Blu-ray would be. It does look like streaming compression may have been part of the problem.
Yeah, so I think I did watch it on a correctly calibrated TV with the lights out and no backlighting. And
I have a backlight, so that helps a little bit, but not a lot.
Yeah, and we were watching it close to live when it came out, and it was quite bad. It was very, very difficult to tell what was going on in some of those dragon on dragon fights. Now, I've heard people who have gone and rewatched it saw a much clearer picture after the streaming compression of the load maybe went down, or the HD version propagated out to more servers or something.
Yeah. I think it's not as bad. I kind of side a little bit with the cinematographer there. And while they also made a choice to try and save some cashola,
sure,
by implying depth with darkness, so you see the front 3 rows of the zombies, and then you don't have to see more, and they can digitally create the dog. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think I'm mad about the choice. I think it's a very stylistic choice, right, of the light versus the darkness, and like very cinematic in that way. I actually thought the episode was well shot overall, like in terms of the direction and the colors, and how like the symbolism of the shots and stuff they were trying to go for, framing and that stuff. It's just they can't not be aware of how this stuff is going to look on people who have like TVs with the blur filter on all the time.
Yeah,
that's people that are going to be running all that stuff.
But it's not a unique problem to Game of Thrones or the distribution part of it, because you've got directors out there in Hollywood that still say things like, you shouldn't watch your things on phones, or it's like, man, it's the modern era. You can say, well, I'm sorry that it didn't look good to you because you watched it on your phone, but beyond that, I'm sorry. I'm not sorry for having made good cinematography. And later in this season, it is pretty much proven that that cinematographer has a pretty good eye. So
absolutely. And I even think this episode was well shot, like, and directed well and stuff. I just think that maybe they could have done a little bit more. I actually watched a YouTube video of like a couple of the scenes where someone had just gone in with a brightness slider.
Yeah.
Literally nothing else. And I was like, oh, this looks way better. The detail is there in the shot.
Mm-hmm.
They just brightened it up, not even 10%, like 5%.
Yeah.
And it still preserves some of those feelings and stuff. Anyway, sure. I don't know. Maybe I should have turned up my TV, right?
Yeah, it's an aesthetic, and unfortunate that it affected that episode for so many people. I still think while this was a good battle, and while there were good battles this season, nothing really compares to the Battle of the Bastards in terms of its veracity, its true nature. Because the battles get so big, starting with this one, that really you're just ping-ponging shot to shot to shot to shot to shot to shot. of, they had to add the Arya sequence into it where she's running through the buildings to break up just all over the place with no sense of space battling.
And this is a problem with an ensemble kind of show like this, where at the end of the show, all your characters have come back to the tip of the story. Everyone's together in one location. You have to show everyone. They got to get their line or their scene or whatever. And so it just ends up with the problem of, all right, we have 40 people. We have to kill a non-zero number of them because this is Game of Thrones.
They really tried to kill to kill a zero number when you look back on it.
They tried really, really hard not to kill anyone. And then we then have to show each person getting their little scene. Yep. Sam getting run over by a zombie here, Jorah dying over here, Theon dying over there, doing XYZ, blah, blah, blah. It's just it was a unfortunate way to end the plot line that was literally advertised from episode 1, season 1, the word go as the big menace, the biggest, most unstoppable force, kind of just gets swept away by like 1,000 people in a castle. I mean, why did they build that wall? This would have been fine. They didn't need to do all this stuff. It made the entire plot line of like a large portion of the show feel pointless with kind of the way they end this here. I guess let's just talk about the other stuff here before I get all the way into Night King stuff. Jorah dies. I thought that was like a pretty good ending for that character,
very
or as good as he could have hoped for based on where he was now.
Yeah, we lose the whole Mormont clan.
Yeah, very sad. We lose feisty little what was her name? The girl,
Lady Mormont. I don't know.
Yeah, the child head of House Mormont that everyone
more
had
Bear
liked.
Island, I guess.
Yeah. We lose her. We lose Theon defending Bran there at the end.
A little suicide charge, which was weird, but meh. A lot of people complained about it, but whatever.
I thought it was a nice end for his character to have been accepted back by Sansa and sort of said like, hey, you have figured your shit out now. Great. Thank you for coming back to be with the people who you consider your found family. And now get out of this show because we got other stuff to do.
Mm-hmm.
And despite when it looks like a bunch of other people are going to die or look like they are dying, no one else actually dies.
Yep. And this begins what I would call the downtrend of Jon Snow.
Yeah, I think that's a fair sort of the like irrelevance of Jon Snow in the show almost, right?
No, I would not call him irrelevant because he plays a major role in the final episode. But I would say, beginning with him falling off a dragon and
into the middle of a giant horde of zombies,
yeah, and
by
sort
himself,
of chasing towards Bran on his own. The show writers here begin to distance themselves from, explicitly doing so, from making Jon the hero.
Right.
They talk about in one of the, I've never watched one of the end things, and I did for this episode because it was so big and important that this ends, and you'll talk about it, I'm sure, because you have a lot of Night King things to say. But when it ends, it was specifically chosen that way by them because it would be unexpected. So
is that a good reason to do things?
It could be a good reason to do things. I don't completely disagree with it as a plot point.
I also actually think in terms of the plot itself, we're talking about Arya killing the Night King here. Just to be clear, I'm not dancing around spoilers.
Sure. Well, I guess I didn't know if you want to get into that part, but we can. I was just going to end the Jon thing with saying, and then they don't even let him kill a dragon.
Right. He literally does. He flies around on a dragon and burns a bunch of zombies and then falls off the dragon. And then you see him fighting his way back into the castle somehow. And then he's about to fight a dragon and then everyone dies.
And I was never worried for 1 minute. You know what I mean?
Yeah. At this point, the literal Jesus character who was killed and resurrected
there was a moment here for him.
His plot armor is fine. He's going to be fine.
There was a moment there, though, for if they weren't going to give him the Night King kill, to walk out into the dragon fire and be like, ooh, he is a Targaryen, and he kills the dragon.
Yeah, so that would have been a way more fun way to introduce the idea of, oh, Jon is a Targaryen because he's unburnt by the fire or whatever.
And Dany sees it from above and without having told him or told her yet, you know?
Maybe, yeah.
Something like that. Anyway.
I have also heard then the showrunners say that, like, actually the thing that happened with Daenerys and the fire and the dragons was like a one-off miracle and she's not immune to fire. So, who knows?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
It's just showrunners say that. We'll see what Martin says, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think that has been explored much in the books. So then we get to Arya and the Night King and the end of the White Walker menace.
Arya survives thanks to the barricade.
Yes.
And the Hound and Melisandre.
Yeah.
Who doesn't resurrect Beric again.
Yeah.
She's just
real
like,
nice
nah,
of her there.
Whatever.
His arc was apparently to be resurrected enough times so that he could stand in that doorway.
Yep.
Pretty jerk move when you think about it.
Melisandre says the Lord of Light kept resurrecting him so he could stand in a doorway and take a bunch of stabs for you.
Man.
And then she runs off through a window or something, and then the showrunners try to make sure that you get enough battle sequence in between to forget where she was.
Right.
And everything looks like it's over. Curious choice to me to not let any of the White Walkers participate in combat and to just sort of wander around.
Right? You never see a single other person fighting a White Walker. It's like they're all standing single file behind the main dude who himself wants to come up and kill the Three-Eyed Raven.
I agree, though, that they weren't necessary for them to fight. There's just too many undead for it to matter. But it was a choice I wonder if fits into a theory that I have later. But then Arya does a thing.
Arya jumps out of the shadows and tries to stab him, but he's too cool for school and turns around and grabs her. And then she does the old "haha, I have two hands" trick and stabs him with her Valyrian dagger. And
which was a nice callback. And the callback to what do we say to the God of Death previous to that. So those two callbacks make you think. And the callback Melisandre even had to a prophecy she herself had said earlier in the series. Right, I would see,
which I thought was and the eyes and blah blah blah.
It all lines up enough to make it not only believable but a good way to do. I wish you had known where she was or something, rather than just sort of flying out of the night.
Yeah, It seems hard to believe that as much of a stealthy, faceless assassin as she has become, she can sneak up on a giant horde of zombies and ice monster, 8,000-year-old ice monster creatures and breeze past, ranks and ranks of them in order to jump at this guy from behind him.
From where is the question, because they're in the middle of the Godswood.
Right. But, dramatic TV. Okay.
Sure. I would buy all of it if I knew where she jumped from, and that would be fine. I still buy it. I just wish
she had jumped from like an upper window down or something, I think then I wouldn't have had an issue with the whole thing, right?
I still don't have an issue with it. I think that it's sad that they thought they had to do it because everyone expected Jon to do it, where there was plenty of foreshadowing to say, no, it was foreshadowed, but they had to fight the fight on like, well, Jon... We had to surprise people. It's like, no, man, like there's a lot of foreshadowing here. Just let Jon kill a damn dragon.
They did that whole thing of giving her the dagger and that dagger all the way from season 1 and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was good. I like that part of it.
I had no issue with how they wrapped that up. I thought it was unexpected. I didn't like the way, they framed it in terms of the battle or whatever, how she sort of just jumped out of nowhere. But honestly, in terms of, the narrative structure of it, it's fine.
I also wonder about if we could have lost more characters here.
Absolutely. And so that's the kind of the way I want to go with the rest of the end of the Army of the Dead here. It kind of seems like this Army of the Dead wasn't that big a deal, and kind of like Cersei was right this whole time to ignore it, and say that it was BS and not care, because they didn't really do that much. I mean, yes, you hear about all these people they killed, and in the next episode, it starts with them burning lots of bodies. But in terms of, us, the viewer, who that we care about actually got hurt in this episode? It's Jorah, and it's the Mormont girl, and Theon,
Beric, Melisandre.
And Melisandre does herself at the end of this, right? She walks out into the snow and says, like, I'm done, takes off her necklace and dies.
I thought Rhaegal was dead.
It was extremely unclear that the dragon was still alive after the end of this episode.
It was definitely unclear that Ghost had made it out of the Dothraki charge.
Absolutely. It was unclear that any Dothraki or Unsullied were left alive.
Yeah.
But do you think they kind of did short shrift to the whole 8,000-year-old ice demon threat menace here?
It's definitely the start of the last couple episodes where it all starts to feel like Cliff Notes. You remember Cliff Notes?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, like, instead of reading the the kids these days, back before you had Wikipedia and you could read a book in a Wikipedia page, we went to the bookstore or
a public library,
and you could get a 50-page synopsis of a couple, 1,000 pages or whatever that told you everything you really needed to know.
And I'm fairly certain these books still exist, because Wikipedia is not 50 pages long.
Anyway, Cliff Notes is what it starts to feel like, where I feel like it maybe should have been 2 episodes or something long, and we should have lost more main characters, and the Night King just assaulting one castle rather than having a plan beyond just obliterate castle.
Would you have felt better if they had done the 2 big sort of set pieces in this show in the opposite order? So
knowing
at
how
the
the show ends, how does that work?
Yeah, so at the time, not knowing how the show ends, I wondered why they were doing the sort of big, bad, evil, unstoppable monster thing first, and then doing the inconsequential, boring human battle second. Now, in retrospect, I don't think you can do that because of the way they wrap up the end of this series. But at the time, it made a lot of sense to me, right? Like, have the White Walkers see that they've defended this town, have them leave like a ring of dead people, and then like walk the rest of the army down to King's Landing and kill everyone, and then come back and we have our big showdown with all of our characters that are left, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, then that doesn't leave you the room for kind of a lot of the stuff that goes down at King's Landing, right?
I think you end up with a very different show doing it in that order, and a show I would also watch because it would be very interesting to do it in that order and see how that could possibly work out and where characters end up at the end of that. I think that I'm left at the end of this episode thinking, man, it's weird that the Night King didn't really do much because he didn't do much. He didn't fight, really, and that kind of gives you the feeling he wasn't a big bad.
He killed that dragon back in season 7, or was it season 6, with the ice spear from 1,000 miles away, and then kind of you don't ever see. He summons a blizzard, and then that's kind of it. You never really see him do much else.
We've missed him obliterating the rest of the North, which is a problem in terms of understanding how much of a problem he is.
Yeah,
and one other issue I have with this part of it is we didn't lose anyone except for Jorah on the Dany's side, right? So
right.
I wonder if she had lost maybe Jorah and Missandei or somebody else here.
Or Grey Worm here.
If we could start to believe the, like, when she's done with that battle and has lost her friends and Sansa's still giving her guff, she starts to get real annoyed. Maybe that's would help with the shortness of this. I don't know.
Sure.
So this episode is great in terms of fun and cinematography and all that sort of stuff, but it starts to begin what I think is the rushed portion of the show.
Yeah, I think calling it rushed is like that's the correct way to frame it, right? It's not that they don't have plans here. You can see them in retrospect, what they were trying to do. But in the moment when you watch it, you're just like getting whiplash from the, like, you know, notes that are happening all at once. Like, it's like, here's a character point, here's a character point, here's a character point. Okay, all this is done next. And, you know,
yeah, it definitely started to feel like a checklist in the middle of this episode where you're like, oh, wait, we need the shot of, and we need the shot of, and that didn't feel very good. But moving on, we got to go.
Moving on. Let's talk about someone else, though, who has some great scenes, both in this episode and the episode before it. Brienne of Tarth.
Sure.
That whole scene in actually is the end of episode 2, right, where Jaime finally gives Brienne her knighthood, and they're all singing or sitting around the fire, drinking and talking and stuff. I think it was legitimately one of the great scenes of this entire season.
I agree.
It gives great kind of ending and closure to Brienne's character had she died in episode 3.
Really feels like she could have,
but she didn't. And then they go straight to messing her character up real bad in episode 4. They kind of give Jaime a nice little redemption arc by making him a nice guy after being such an asshole for the entire series. You know, he gave up Cersei to come do the right thing, and be with Brienne and give her her knighthood. And then, you know, they sleep together because they realize they've been kind of like secretly wanting to do this the entire season and the entire show.
It was believable. It was like they had slowly fallen for the ideals, you know, shared ideals and all that sort of stuff. And
then after all of this, Jaime turns around and does after you finally buy the redemption arc, Jaime turns around, does a 180 and says, actually, I love Cersei, bye, I gotta be an asshole.
I really miss in that fire scene where everyone goes to bed and Bran and Tyrion are sitting alone, and he's like, I bet you have good stories. I wish we had another 30 minutes of just that, right? Because, like, given where we end up, Bran doesn't have much in the way of character development at all.
Oh, yeah. Bran may as well be a, like,
cardboard
MacGuffin
cutout
for this entire season until the very end. Actually, even after the very end.
He's just a cardboard cutout, it seems like, of like a little oracle, right? You know?
He delivers he delivers information that people for whatever reason accept as true, even though I would imagine a lot of the people don't have any reason to believe him.
Well, yeah, Dany mentions so.
And
your brother told you? Okay.
Yeah, he's just some weird kid. Why do I have to listen to this kid?
Right.
So I don't know. What are they doing with Jaime here, man? And you see how Jaime's arc ends with Cersei down in the dungeon dying, and you're just like, why? He had this nice redemptive arc. It was a good end for him. Not that I like wanted him to live with Brienne in happiness or whatever, but like, come on, man.
There was a moment to have them fight back to back and bite it
together, and that would have been a great ending for both of them, right?
Yep. I thought, if we're moving into episode 4 here, I did think for a very few minutes, okay, he's going down there because he has to be the one to kill her.
I also thought that, and that was the only thing that kept my hope alive that the show was going to redeem itself. That's a little unfair. I did actually like some of the ways that things wrapped up, but I didn't like Jaime's arc or Cersei's arc in this entire season based on the way they concluded it. Just really, really unfortunate. It's like Cersei just plays the cartoon bad guy and basically gets like 15 lines the entire season, maybe?
Maybe.
And Jaime has his redemptive arc and then actually turns back to evil arc and then gets captured and is set free by his brother for like what feels like the 50th time, and then goes off to die. Just such a bummer, man. I'm frustrated because they had a great redemptive arc for him and then just threw it away because his character has to be a jerk. Unfortunate.
It is odd that a lot, and this goes all the way through the end, a lot of loose ends tie themselves up, or every character's full arc kind of ends before the show does.
Right.
And then they're left to do something else other than what has been alluded to or foreshadowed or actually written in to their character for the entire thing. So like Jaime outlives what should be his death because he's not that good a fighter at Winterfell.
And even if you buy that somehow he survives Winterfell, how does he outfight Euron Greyjoy with one hand?
Supposedly,
what?
Right? Yeah. I mean, he doesn't. Yeah. He dies because of it.
He takes a fatal sword wound, but Euron takes a more fatal one and dies first.
Right. The power of love, JJ.
I guess, dude.
All right, walk us through episode 4, if you can.
I don't remember what happens in episode 4. Is episode 4 when Varys gets killed?
Varys gets killed in 5. Episode 4 is the recoup episode where we find out that Rhaegal is still alive.
Oh, right, yeah.
Dany takes the ocean with the Unsullied.
Right.
Jaime rides off in the night.
Is this when does that dragon die in episode 5 also, or does it die here?
I believe it dies in 4 also, yeah.
Okay, so we find out that it's alive only to get it killed 30 seconds later in the most improbable naval ambush of all time, or questionable military tactics on display.
It was odd. It seemed like they knew something. I thought when I saw those ships show up, I was like, oh, Sansa told them where they were for half a minute.
Yeah, you were like, aha, they've been betrayed, right? Yeah.
Jon tells his family that he's Aegon Targaryen, true king.
And then says, please, guys, don't tell anyone.
And then we begin something I want to come back to at the end of the show. Sansa says, you should be king.
Yeah.
And then proceeds to tell Tyrion.
If you follow the Westerosi laws of succession set forth by the books, and I believe at least alluded to in the show, Jon is actually the rightful king and has been the entire time. His throne was usurped by Robert Baratheon. Right. So he has always been the king if you follow the logic of their world.
Let's start this Sansa logic track, which has never been a good logic track at any point in the show. My brother...
They allude to her having outwitted Littlefinger in the end, which is the only good logical thing.
They got him in a room and they stabbed him. I don't know how that's outwitting him.
Oh, no, he thought he was in control of everything there and found out that, nah, dog.
Okay, so.
Anyway.
My brother, because I still call him my brother, should be king. Okay, that's the logic. He should sit on the throne and we should all be ruled by him.
And because he's the rightful heir, right?
He's the rightful heir. All right, so we'll come back to that at the end of the show. Episode 4, yeah, so he tells his family tells Tyrion. Tyrion tells Varys.
Sansa immediately goes off and says nah, dude, I'm gonna just tell Tyrion because Jon doesn't know what's good for himself.
Yeah,
and the North doesn't kneel to the kings,
right?
Which Sansa, yeah. What?
I know.
Okay, at least she's consistent,
right?
Kind of.
I think that's pretty. Dany goes
Sansa
into
or Tyrion tells Varys, right? And Varys is like, oh, this is a big deal. We should drop this queen and go support Jon now.
Yeah. I think we're bleeding into episode 5 here too.
It's fine.
Or no,
not a lot happens in episode 4.
No, because episode 5 is the battle. So when this is still episode 4, then they
capture Jaime here.
Yeah, Missandei gets captured, and they go to.
Right. The improbable naval battle occurs. Missandei gets captured. The dragon gets shot out of the sky by the best fired crossbows of all time, or scorpions, or whatever giant ballista things on the boats.
I guess.
Dany loses her fleet, which
doesn't seem to matter somehow.
Yeah.
They also, come up with more boats later to get everybody to the land.
Yeah. Also, I actually completely believe that part. The Ironborn being better, sailors and pirates or whatever.
Yeah, it's fine. I just wonder how they got everybody from Dragonstone, where they swam to after the naval battle, to the mainland without the Iron Fleet just blockading Dragonstone.
Yeah, or how a person who's flying, miles up in the air on a dragon doesn't see a bunch of boats coming from around a corner of a mountain. Certainly seems like something you could have seen coming if you were paying attention at all.
Well,
or how you could have just then used the dragon to go burn all the ships right there rather than waiting to do that next episode.
Missandei loses her head.
Nope, that's the next episode.
No, because
Wait, am I getting confused?
You're getting confused because
oh, that's right. Tyrion then says,
"Please." 5 is King's Landing. 6 is post King's Landing.
You're right. Okay, so Tyrion says, "Okay, well, let's let's go. You know, Cersei will negotiate. She'll give us Missandei back and surrender. Let's at least try, right?"
Mm-hmm.
So he goes out there, and obviously Cersei is having none of it because, like, why would she do that? And Missandei dies. And that's kind of the end of her arc. And I mean, not kind of, it's pretty certainly the end. She's beheaded.
And then should they go back to Dragonstone?
Yeah, real unclear about how this happens here.
Waiting for Jon to show up with his army. They go back to Dragonstone, and she goes into seclusion.
Dany is real mad about this, very clearly, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Missandei had sort of been her best friend for the last best friend she had. She left Dario in Meereen, and Grey Worm is, a military dude, but never really her friend. Tyrion has been really just screwing up royally left and right the entire show, or the last 3 seasons anyway.
I just don't get it. I don't get the.
How does no one execute that man?
No, it doesn't. Fine, but. He's supposed to be the smartest man in the 7 Kingdoms, and Varys is supposed to be the sneakiest man in the 7 Kingdoms.
Right.
What?
They are acting like a bunch of, school kids caught by their teacher, more or less, like passing notes and stuff.
It definitely starts to feel like all the characters have fallen apart from where they were. I don't know if that's written that way or what, but on purpose?
I would make a good argument here that so this must be the episode where Varys gets burned then, right?
Yeah.
Why?
No, he gets burned at the beginning of the next one. He gets burned at the very beginning of the next one because then Jon's there and he goes over to the mainland.
And then they have the whole battle?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Varys is one of the characters at this point who I kind of feel that his plot is, why is he still in this show based on the way his plot has kind of resolved? He didn't need to be here, but there was apparently some kind of book note or something they took that said he needed to die this way. And so they dragged his character along until he could make the one last scene they needed him for.
Well, the last scene they need him for is to say he's sending out notes all over the place that Jon is king.
Right.
None of that comes to fruition.
Or matters even in the slightest.
So why do it?
Yeah. Why was he there, right? Yeah. Now in the books, Varys is all tied up with Illyrio and the Aegon Targaryen pretender, maybe, young Griff and Jon Connington and all those people who aren't in the show at all. And that entire storyline kind of, I feel, is going to have a lot to do with what Varys is going to be, his end game is going to be. Mm-hmm. In which case then they kind of excised his whole ending. And so why was he still here in the show, right?
Right, yeah.
He would have been one of those people to have died in the crypts in Winterfell or something, and that would have been a, good enough ending for him, I think. Could have
been.
So I guess we've kind of been bleeding into episode 5 here, or the beginning of it anyway.
Yeah.
Dany's first attempt at being evil of Varys, you betrayed me by spreading all this info about Jon. I'm going to burn you alive. And then she does. Okay. I bought it, though. I didn't feel like this was necessarily that far out of her character based on what she had done to the Tarleys in the last season.
No, it's fine.
Right? They wouldn't surrender, and they wouldn't, swear fealty to her. So she said, all right, you're going to die. Varys did a thing that is she had explicitly told them not to do. So he dies. Okay. I didn't think so far this was outrageous behavior from her. Although I guess we're meant to see it that way.
I don't think we were meant to see it
in
that
retrospect.
way.
I don't know.
I don't think so. I think that it's pretty well established then, and then she says Jon also betrayed me because he told his sisters, but she doesn't punish him.
Yeah.
That's confusing. But I guess she needs him, and she's still in love with him or whatever.
And people do stuff for love, I guess, is the get away or get out of jail card there.
But he spurns her, and then they go off to war.
And Tyrion has to free his brother because he loves him also.
Sure.
And yet, like, wants him to save his sister and have them row away to some weird life in Essos in a rowboat or something. Unclear how that's supposed to work. So Tyrion frees him, which more or less seals his fate. But then it doesn't. That actually made me really mad.
Why?
He literally sets free a prisoner to go to the queen, who Daenerys hated the whole time, and then she doesn't just kill him immediately for doing this stuff?
I just want to know.
She had already made the heel turn and become evil. Like, why not just kill him? It would have been, it would have been an evil thing for her to do, right?
I just want to know how anybody remembered that or figured out that he set him free. Like, so many people died. They went off to war.
There were all those soldiers that were standing there. He was like, leave us alone, guys. One of them had to tell something.
I guess.
I don't know. That annoyed me. But in the grand scheme of things, not that bad, I guess, compared with what then happens for the rest of the episode. Most of this episode, episode 5 now, titled "The Bells."
Right.
We see a giant battle in King's Landing.
But is it the battle?
Well, there is a fight happening.
So the Drogon takes like a super mushroom or like an invincibility star or something,
right? And decides that actually all those things that killed my brother dragon last time really didn't matter that much, and I'm just going to burn all of them right now.
Takes out an entire city's worth and the whole Iron Fleet and the front gate and the entire Golden Company.
It really seems like they could have done this back at sea last time. But I guess, I don't know.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have made for good TV, I guess.
I'm just wondering about episode 4 when Missandei loses her head, how she didn't just jump on the dragon and do all that.
Yeah, why didn't we do this? It would have been a good time for it. They clearly didn't need the ground forces.
Yeah. The ground forces do run in, and they have a battle. Tyrion tells Jon to pull out if he hears the bells.
Right. He had told Daenerys earlier in the show, if they ring the bells, it means they're surrendering. They'll open the gates, just like throw down, don't slaughter everyone for no reason if they surrender, right?
Like Varys said you would.
Like Varys said you would. And then, of course, you get the most obvious foreshadowing, or at least to me, I completely 100% expected this to happen.
Obvious within this season, though, right?
Oh, sure. I don't know that if you had asked me at the end of season 7 if I thought she would do this, I would have not been sure. I would have been pretty sure about my prediction for how Daenerys ends, but I don't know that I would have been so sure about this. But so she decides that, actually what I'm going to do is kill all these people because they deserve it and they're bad.
Kill everyone. My own
army,
everyone. Their army, everybody.
Yeah, it's just like, I'm going to burn the entire town now because these people are bad because they opposed me. And on one hand, you kind of get it. But on the other, like, especially a very well shot and framed scene with, the 2 lines of battle being drawn between the Lannister army that's left and Jon and Grey Worm and the Northmen and people. And the Lannisters, like the people finally just giving up and throwing down their swords. And then Grey Worm being like, no, actually, let's kill them all after he sees the dragon fly, right?
Yeah.
And then they just slaughter them, right? And then it is just a slaughter for the rest of the episode. It is like truly the horrors of war for this entire episode. Like you're seeing buildings being destroyed, people dying left and right, just fire everywhere, dead and burnt bodies of children, just like pull out a trope from a horror movie about war or a horrible scene from a war. I feel like they got it in here. They really wanted to let you know that this was a really messed up thing to do.
Yeah.
And I thought it worked, actually.
It was all right. For the story they were telling, it was
for the story they were telling, right?
It was very beautiful footage.
There are a few other character arcs that happen in this. We haven't talked about Arya and the Hound or Sandor Clegane here. I think this is a good time to bring them up since both of these people kind of choose their courses here in this episode.
They both snuck in to kill some people.
Right. Sandor had decided, I guess, at some point that he was okay with, or he needed to end things with his brother, who is the zombie mountain who's been alive since the beginning of the show, it seems. I thought this, the Clegane Bowl, the hype theory that everyone had been having where Sandor would go back and fight his brother to the death, to sort of settle the score that had happened to him as a young child. Did it live up to the hype for you, Andrew?
Sure.
Yeah, you liked it?
I thought that the crumbling building around them was a bit ridiculous.
Yes, extremely ridiculous.
But I thought overall he was outmatched correctly, and I don't know how else he beats him except for the running them both off the thing.
Yeah, I actually think the fight scene itself was fine, and kind of how it had to end, where they both die in the fire, because fire being his big fear, right? Or Sandor's big fear the whole time. And, pushing Gregor and himself, sort of sacrificing himself to get rid of his brother was kind of the right ending for that character. Yeah,
it felt good at the end of that in terms of like, oh, I wish he'd lived, but what does he do if he lived,
Yeah, he doesn't get, that kind of a guy doesn't get a redemption. He really just, he did his nice thing by finally turning Arya off of her vengeance. Which I guess is the next thing we'll talk about. Although I do want, it was a good ending for him. I agree with you that the apocalyptic building crumbling and dragon fire in the background got a little bit over the top, but overall I think it was sort of the correct character ending for those guys.
Sure. If they had been down in the map room, I think it would have been, but then
a better scene,
they end
maybe
up in the fire, but
they get you just have the dragon fly over on top and burn them both to death,
I guess.
So that's the end of Sandor. But before he did that, right, he finally dissuaded Arya from killing Cersei. How did you feel about that? I know it was a very divisive opinion. A lot of people are super mad she didn't get to finish her list.
See, this is why I don't read stuff, because I didn't know people would be super mad about that.
Sure.
How else does... and
to be clear, Arya never referenced the list, not even once the entire season.
Right. Yeah, and there are
people talk about going to. She did talk about going to kill Cersei, which is why she was there, but hadn't mentioned the list, quote unquote.
Right. They don't mention the list because Ilyn Payne's still on it, and he can't be killed.
And I mean, there's a bunch of other characters on it who, Sandor was on it for a while, and. Littlefinger and a bunch of other people. So,
well, she got Littlefinger.
No, I know. I'm just saying that, there's her list had people who she has excused off of it before, so it's not the first time.
Sure. I think that I don't understand an ending for the character if she doesn't walk away. What's weird to me is that she walks away from this knowing that she wants to be true and good at the end of it and not just be consumed, and then walks through the battle, gets the white horse, and then
the white horse disappears in the next episode.
Well, and then what she doesn't go after the person that murdered tons of people after spending that long trying to punish people for little things.
And I don't understand how she'd been so consumed by this quest to kill all these people all this time. She finally got her family back at the end of last season. They finally, had some bonding time here. They defeat the army of the dead. She is literally the hero of the world by killing the Night King. But her quest for vengeance keeps driving her. It makes her ride all the way south to King's Landing and sneak into the camp and, sneak into the city. And then at the last minute, she gets cold feet and decides no?
I think that you hit it on the head a little bit. She got her family back. Sandor makes the pitch that I think is right, which is the queen's already dead. Look around you. And you don't want to become me, right?
You're
not. No, he says this is the end of you. If you stay here, you're dead, right? She's already dead. You're going to die being me. You're not going to die being something more. You can walk out of here right now knowing it's over, because she's not going to make it out of here, and you don't have to be consumed the rest of your life. And I think that's a solid argument. I don't not buy that part of
argument. You don't think that argument could have been given for her to stay at Winterfell or something?
No, because
Like,
she wouldn't have seen with her own eyes that Cersei was going to get it.
Okay. All right. I think I buy that. I initially was like really skeptical of this turn that she would just decide after all of this time and like one half speech from a guy that, you know, she had sort of come to know well out after hanging out with for a season and a half before. Okay. I think your argument makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I don't know in the moment that I bought it.
Okay.
But afterwards, you know, we need, I guess the other thing is we need her perspective to show all the horrors of war for the rest of the episode.
True.
So
it's not necessary. We could find somebody else to do it.
Yeah. You know, I guess it would have then been Jon Snow leading around the poor people who get burned to death.
It would have been helpful if it was Jon.
It could have then given him some righteous anger to do some of the things that he does later.
I think he had righteous anger to begin with, but I think that it could have been Jon, and that might have been... It might have been more poignant because Arya doesn't do anything with the righteous anger she gets.
Yeah.
You know?
Arya channels her righteous anger into sailing a boat off into the sunset.
And not defending her brother at all.
Nope.
Who did the right thing.
Yeah. So, yeah, wrap up on episode 5 here. Is there much else? Did you buy Daenerys' turn here?
I think that I wish that it had been more laid out that she wasn't... Oh, she's cray, you know? She got the crazy eye, and now she's a Targaryen and the coin flip, whatever.
Yeah.
I think I would have bought a little bit better the argument she made to Jon, which was, all right, fine, they're not going to love me, so they'll have to fear me. I would have written it differently. She burns down the Red Keep and nothing else. You know, and then
Cersei had gathered all the small people around the keep, and you could have said, "Oh, she murdered all those people there while burning the castle down."
Trying to get Cersei, yeah.
A little more defensible, but still crossing a line that maybe is one line too far, right?
Right, yeah.
I just the way it was shot, it gave this really, really unfortunate look of like, oh, she's doing this crazy thing because she's a crazy woman now, and you're just like, oh, guys, come on, like. It's like literally the surrender bells toll, and it's like she can't stand hearing that noise. She has to murder everyone.
Yeah,
it's kind of how the shot got framed.
It definitely. I mean, that's what they sold you. It definitely is what they sold you. Is that at the beginning of that episode they reminded you that the gods flip a coin on the Targaryens.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're supposed to think, oh, that's okay. Then Jon's the only one that might have gotten the right coin flip, and all this foreshadowing and stuff is set up, and then we end episode 5 with what should be.
Right.
Okay.
And so, you know, we march into episode 6, and Dany has consolidated her army really fast.
And changed
clothes. And snow is falling now, or is it ash?
Snow? Yeah, I think it's snow. So... Katie was convinced it was snow, and I thought it was ash, and then it just kept coming down. I think it's snow.
I think it's snow, but it also could be ash, and actually it's fine either way.
Completely.
It definitely gives like this really apocalyptic feel. They literally do the scene where Daenerys is an evil dictator now, as she like comes out on the top of the plaza after landing in her evil transport vehicle, and stands out wearing all black and gives a salute to her army and tells them how we're going to conquer the world and kill everyone. And you're like, wow, that went from 0 to 100 in the space of 5 screen minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And Tyrion decides he, for one, has had enough, and he throws his badge and's like, I can't believe you'd kill these people or whatever. So obviously he gets arrested. Wait, what? Why doesn't she just execute him right there? If she's evil now, like...
Yeah, I don't know.
I
wanted to make a public display of it.
I guess.
I can't. There's no way to write what happened there other than it happened. But it's odd that John just hangs.
And John's like, man, this seems not as good as it could be, but I love her, guys.
Yeah.
And goes and walks away and is sad and mopey for the rest of the episode, basically. He then then indeterminate amounts of time pass, and John goes and visits Tyrion in a jail cell, where we have the only callback of the season that I liked. I talked about love being the death of duty.
He does mention, hey, you don't know this, but she did the same exact thing across the narrow sea. And
Tyrion in episode 6 lays out a great case for why we should believe what she did in episode 5. That could have been the kind of thing you did before episode 6.
That Varys laid out before Tyrion to try and convince him we need to make a different approach here, because here's what's going to happen. She did all these things. She's going to up the ante again, and the only way to up the ante again is to accost the little people.
She will, the dangers of zealotry and people believing in their own ideals and all this stuff. There's a great speech to be had there. It's unfortunate they waited to have it in episode 6 after the horrible events, rather than doing it before to help sell the obvious, really horrible events.
Okay.
Kind of a bummer there, but I guess we're meant to believe that John finally sees the light after that conversation.
I think John saw the light before that conversation and just needed convincing.
Just needed convincing.
He walked in there already convinced that she had done something heinous.
Oh, sure. You could see he believed that. He was just looking for someone to tell him what to do about it, even though he knew, right?
Right. Yeah, of course.
Or, well, maybe he didn't know to do exactly what he did, but he at least kind of he knew stuff was wrong, and he was the person who had to solve it, right?
Yeah.
And so he solves it.
Sure does.
We get a very iconic scene of Daenerys walking into the throne room after the castle has been burnt out with the snow falling from the vision. And her walking up and touching the Iron Throne, but she didn't sit down, Andrew. What if she had sat down?
What if?
We'll never know, because she sees Jon and is feeling good about herself, so she goes over and talks with him, and he decides that he's okay with kissing her one last time, and then he stabs her to death. and then he stabs her to death.
Yeah. Okay.
I saw this coming. Like I said, I was relatively certain based on how the lore from the books and stuff talks a lot about the prince that was promised and a bunch of stuff that the show doesn't care at all about very clearly.
Well, because that would be in the wrong order then.
Yep. And how he has to forge a magical sword made from the blood of his true love being stabbed through the heart. That basically fit only these two characters, so I was pretty sure that's how that was going to go. But again, it was, they changed so much and ignored so much prophecy that who could say that this was how it was going to go? But it is how it went. Real anticlimactic end for her character, don't you think?
Uh-huh. Yeah, she kind of just gets it, and
then
that's kind of the Game of Thrones way. It's just crazy to see it in season 8.
Right.
They tried to have a discussion where he says, "Who are we to know what's right?" And she's like, "Well, we just sort of make up what's right. It's up to me now."
Yeah, and it's just like the most cartoony villain thing to say is like, I decide what's right because I'm the evil person who's in charge. You're like, okay.
There's a chance for them to have had a really good scene between the two of them where he basically convinces himself and her that what's coming has to come, right? Like, she may not be convinced that she's done wrong, but like where he walks her through, like, these are the terrible things that I can't understand and, that you've done, but I still love you. And she calls,
And she could have sold the idea that she believes her own zealotry, that she believes that she's the one doing the thing. They kind of tried to have this conversation,
but again,
I don't think it was done too particularly well.
But again, we have the Cliff Notes version.
Right, exactly. This scene has to take place in 5 minutes because we've got a lot of other stuff to get to here.
Right. Well, this has to be an hour and a half episode, so we really got to mosey on through you killing me. So hurry it up.
And to not have to deal with what happened to Daenerys and her body and people not immediately murdering Jon when they see him and her dead body together, her dragon very helpfully comes up and burns the Iron Throne down for symbolism and then takes her body away and is never to be seen again.
So we'll come back to never to be seen again. Why didn't he try to burn down Jon?
Because he's a Targaryen, completely unknown.
So if he's a Targaryen, the dragon maybe doesn't take off or tries to burn him down. And again, there's a chance to that scene where Targaryen's immune to fire. Oh, okay, well then I don't have to ride off. And Jon is now immune from the rest of this show because he's got a dragon.
Yeah. So obviously we're not going to do that.
Nope. Instead, we're going to 5 years later.
Yeah. And I don't think it's even intended to be 5 years, but it is like indeterminate amount of time passes.
I think we have to editorialize through the ending of this and then get back to, because this is immediately now, like right at the moment that dragon flies off is the beginning of, huh? What? Huh? Wait, why? What? Hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Decision making for the rest of the show.
The end of that part is just like, okay, the dragon takes off and is done, and everyone is like, well, I guess now it is time for the wrap up. The story has concluded. Let's get to the epilogue here. Here's what happened to all your favorite people.
It literally is the 1-page epilogue, high school yearbook notes.
Exactly.
Version.
I was going to bring up the end of Ferris Bueller.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, here's 100%. What happened to people. You get one sentence, a picture of them, and one sentence about where they are today.
Pretty much, yeah.
And, it's like, oh, we're going to have a king's meeting, and now we're going to democratically, like Magna Carta style, elect our king.
I love I had a moment of panic, a sheer moment of panic when Tarly says, well, we should all elect the leader, and everyone's silent, and I was like, please, for the love of everything that has happened in this show, do not somehow invent democracy in the last 7 minutes of this episode.
Oh my God, I was going to throw something at the TV if they did that. Thankfully, everyone laughs at that idea, at the really dumb idea that it is.
Yeah.
Especially in the, look, democracy is great and we live in a democratic country and we like it very much, but we don't like a show being all about feudalism and monarchies and kings all of a sudden being like, democracy, you guys.
Yeah.
Like, no one is going to buy that stuff, dude. There's 1,000 years of political development you got to get to first.
I want to know how this meeting even happened, but we'll get to all these questions later.
Who knows and who cares, because everyone, Tyrion has been arrested and Jon Snow has also been arrested. All the important people come and decide to bring Jon and Tyrion out here. We're going to make important decisions now.
We're going to, Grey Worm seems to be subservient to them, but also not.
Even though he's the guy apparently in charge of the whole city. So why does he even listen to them?
Right. Yeah. Why didn't he execute Jon and Tyrion already?
Immediately he could have done that. As a person who was intending to do that, but only not because his queen told him not to. She's gone. He could. I'm just saying.
Yep.
Anyway, so he brings Tyrion out so that Tyrion can have a monologue and tell people that Bran should be king, I guess. What?
That is the hardest left turn in the whole show.
So I will say one thing I knew, I knew going into this episode that Vegas odds Bran was the favorite. Now, that smells to me a little bit like someone talked, because they did not foreshadow that basically at all.
It also, if I am a Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and I've met Bran for more than 5 minutes, makes no sense. Bran is the three-eyed raven and has literally for the whole show not cared about a single thing that is happening around him or any of the people. A man that should be king, we should choose the man that will be the best for all of us. Well, there's going to be a famine next year, so we should go murder 5,000 people. so that we have enough food, would be the way that the Three-Eyed Raven sees that scenario.
He has a really good story, though, Andrew, and that's what's important, right?
Stories matter.
Yes.
Bran the Broken is the name of who?
That is a really mean nickname to give your king.
Terrible.
So I definitely didn't see that part coming. I don't think I'm mad about it.
I'm not mad about it. No.
Right. I just think it's a confusing choice.
It makes no sense at all.
I don't know why other people would agree to it. I see the logic from like the writer's perspective or the storytelling perspective, but I don't see any logic to it from the other characters. Like, why would any of the other characters, maybe other than Sansa and Arya, agree to that?
Or, yeah, Sam maybe too.
Also, why is Arya there? Why does she get any kind of vote?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Why does Sam get a vote? Why does Gendry, who is legitimized by a person who is dead, get a vote?
Well, Sam's the last Tarly. So
even though he's dressed in maester's robes at that point.
Yeah.
But yes.
Yeah, I guess. He's a maester and the head of a house. All right, cool.
Right.
Well, Bran can do whatever he wants. He's king.
Yeah, I guess.
Hold on. We're missing the best part. Bran is not king of the Seven Kingdoms.
Nope. Sansa, everyone goes around the table and is like, yep, this seems good. Okay, Bran, yep. And it gets to Sansa, and Sansa's like, actually, we're gonna remain independent. Sorry, guys, lol.
It's just like the fun. It made me laugh out loud that it was like, got to get to Sansa stabbing somebody in the back. Hurry.
And then it was like,
I love you, little brother, but whatever. I'm not gonna let you be king of the North anymore. So let me line up what I said earlier. Jon should be king of everything. Bran should be king, but not of me.
And then, her perspective of the North needs to be independent or whatever. Okay, but then why didn't immediately the other independence-minded nations like the Greyjoys and Dorne both go, yeah, us too, because they are the ones who absolutely hate being ruled?
Well, I have two questions about that. One, how do the Greyjoys not think Jon is a god, first of all? Their house words are, what is dead may never die, and Jon came back from the dead.
Yep.
So he should be like their saint. And secondly, when Sansa immediately pulls out of the Seven Kingdoms, why do they still want Bran to be king?
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
If you can't bring the North back to the Seven Kingdoms, then see you later. We'll pick somebody else.
Yeah.
What sense does that
Someone
make?
from one of our kingdoms.
Oh my God. Yeah. Let's have a ruler from the North because he has a good story and he can see all things past and future. Maybe, probably. But
unclear
also,
what he can see.
Yeah. Who feels like he's acting. Oh, man. It just makes no sense. The Bran thing makes even less sense when the North breaks off.
And why is Brienne there? Why does she get to vote?
She's the head of a house, too.
Okay. I guess that's true. I mean, you never see her house or hear anything about it.
Or that her dad is dead or anything, yeah. But she's a knight and she's a Tarth? Brienne of Tarth?
Yeah.
I don't know her last name, but...
Tarth is the island she's from. Yeah.
Man, that ending moment right there. Woof.
Real something that happens there. And then Bran's like, cool. Now that we're all decided I'm king, Tyrion is my hand. And everyone doesn't just laugh at him.
They did. Well, they kind of are like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. And then he's like, yeah, but he'll work hard because he screwed everything up.
He screwed everything up for the past 4 seasons. So now I'm going to make him pay for it by fixing it all. Yeah. That's like a funny line, but man, why?
Yeah. I'm left kind of like, it's like really yucky here. Where if you assume that he's the Three-Eyed Raven and that he knows everything, he's known since he became the Three-Eyed Raven that he was going to be king. And went on...
I think you have to assume he doesn't know everything. I think you can only assume he knows...
No, because he says, do you want to be king? Tyrion says, do you want to be king? He's like, why else do you think I'm here? Like, I already knew this is what's supposed to happen.
So, but that doesn't mean... So, okay. I think... My point is that I don't think he knows everything. I think he knows the stuff he chooses to see. And it seems like he chose to see that, right? But you can't see that he's like omniscient.
I see. Because later on he says, I'm going to go find Drogon. Why? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly why. What is the purpose of that?
I don't. Why? The whys
why?
are starting. I thought we would make it to the end before the whys, but no.
Nope. Because now we got to talk about everyone's favorite character, Bronn. Why is he even in this show? Why wasn't he killed 3 seasons ago?
Because people like him.
What? Andrew, the character served no purpose. He showed up in for 2 seconds in episode 4 to tell Jaime and Tyrion, I'll kill you guys, but I won't. And then he leaves. And then he shows up again as the master of coin for some reason because he wants to rebuild brothels.
Again, this feels like the Cliff Notes version of thousands and thousands of pages of you. These are the people you're left with because everyone else is dead.
Bronn is an invention of the show, really. He doesn't show up almost at all in the books.
Correct, yes.
And, beyond book 2 or something. And so, why didn't they just have him F off to a castle somewhere after they paid him, for saving Tyrion at the Blackwater or whatever? Why does he keep showing up? God knows, I don't understand it. It's I get maybe he's a popular character, but man, he sure served no purpose in this season whatsoever. And in fact, every scene that he was in was made worse by his presence. Not that the acting was bad necessarily, but why are you here?
It would have made sense to keep him in the show if he had kept on with Jaime like he did during that battle.
Right.
Because he was still a lord or something.
Right. Or Jaime was still paying him to defend him, so that you could get someone who can fight protecting Jaime because Jaime sucks at fighting.
Right. And then he earns his keep, and that's why he's there at the end. But yeah. I'm going to point a crossbow, and then I'm going to be in the last scene. It definitely smacks of we got to have a fun character left.
I saw people online saying that Bronn has a high Q rating, so this is why he gets to survive. I don't know what Q rating means, but it sounds like this guy scores well on popularity tests.
I see.
So that's the end of him. Sam becomes the Archmaester, which I guess is great for a college dropout.
Sure. Why not?
Brienne becomes king of leader of the Kingsguard, I guess.
Yep.
And then the book, Andrew.
What about the book?
Previously in the show, Jaime had made a big deal about his page on the Book of Brothers, the book of the tales of all the members of the Kingsguard. And his page ends with, has killed the king and shall ever be after known with the Kingslayer.
Okay.
And for a while, that was Jaime's driving reason to do stuff. And then we never hear about it again for, let's say, 6 seasons.
Okay.
And they bring it up at the end so that Brienne can write a nice, wonderful little tale about the wonderful things Jaime did for her, and then say that he died protecting his queen.
I don't know.
I don't
know.
I don't know.
It would have been pretty impactful if it said died protecting the 7 kingdoms or something like that.
Right. I think Brienne giving Jaime a nice eulogy there
seems like absolution, right?
Right. It's no, don't forgive him for being a jackass. He was he was a bad man in the end, and you don't need to forgive him for that. But it posthumously puts a nice bow on Jaime's character after he dies ignominiously in the crypts or whatever. I think it was a good ending for Brienne, getting to become the king, the leader of the Kingsguard.
Sure.
Podrick becoming a member of the Kingsguard also, and the wheelchair attendant, I guess. Decent ending for him. Arya sails off into the west in search of the land of the elves or whatever.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe she'll find the children of the forest or something.
Is she going to sail off into a sequel, do you think?
Oh, no.
Yeah,
not
I sure hope not.
Yeah.
So, we've got a few other characters left here. Davos, who we haven't talked about at all.
Yeah, it's kind of what I feel about Davos. He definitely, after the Battle of the Winterfell, what's the point of Davos?
Yeah, he had nothing left to do, so he was dragged along so that he could be the nice master of ships at the end. Okay.
Yep, I'm good with that.
Yeah, I'm pretty good with that.
I feel like in a different world, in this show, he had a lot more to do. In the non-Cliff Notes version, he was probably pretty essential.
Right. And, you can definitely see there's a case where he's, acting as the voice of reason to Jon, or talking to Daenerys, trying to convince her, laying out problematic behavior and so forth. But we don't get that version of this season. Let's see. Is there anyone else before we talk about Jon?
No, I don't think. I mean, we didn't really talk about Tyrion's end here, where he's the hand at.
Sure.
I mean,
kind of like, hey, life is back to normal for Tyrion, even though
they rebuilt King's Landing pretty fast.
Yeah, huh? Really don't know that I believe a lot of that.
Well, I don't know why they didn't abandon it. Move the capital.
It was pretty darn well destroyed.
The Unsullied take a boat across the ocean.
They're going to go to Narth because that's where Missandei was from.
The Dothraki disappear.
Yeah,
into the night.
One of the great injustices done to again, like you're saying, the Cliff Notes version, right? Like there was so much made about how the Dothraki would, go wild in Westeros and how they would kill everyone, but Dany could control them because she was their, the Khaleesi and all this stuff. And then after the battle, there's a bunch of them alive, but we never hear about what happens to them. They're just gone.
Sure would have been smart of them to just get rid of the Dothraki out in the Battle of Winterfell.
Yeah, man, sure seemed like that would have been just fine to do, huh?
Uh-huh. And it brings up a big question. Why'd they disappear when their Khal is in prison?
Did they ever really believe Jon was the leader?
If you kill the Khal, you're the Khal.
Oh, I forgot about that. You're absolutely right. They would have completely bought that. Because that's definitely something the Dothraki would be on board with.
So how did the Dothraki and the Unsullied not kill each other? Because the Unsullied took Jon into prison.
Yeah, great question. I guess maybe you're led to believe there the Unsullied just killed all. Because there's nothing else that would have made any sense.
I'm pretty sure you see some in the dock shot.
Yeah, you probably do.
So, yeah. Jon Snow.
Jon Snow.
Jon never Stark. Aegon Targaryen.
Tyrion goes and visits him in a jail cell very clearly, and after a while, and Jon's like, "You're not dead, and I'm not dead. What's going on?" I guess we're led to believe that he just confessed to the crime and wasn't executed on the spot. Because why else would he have been there?
I assume he copped to it because he's that kind of guy.
He's definitely that kind of guy, but like that would have been a scene they could have shown, right?
Sure.
And so then the wisdom of the king is that Jon should be sent back to the Night's Watch.
I screamed at the television at the top of my lungs, "Why is there still a Night's Watch? That's the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life." I screamed that at the television.
Tyrion addresses your concern immediately after and says, well, there still needs to be a place for broken men and for us to send the people we don't like anymore.
So literally a prison.
What? Isn't that what jail is, my man?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do they need a Night's Watch? It makes and it's not like the ending you get, you're like, oh, I get it, the Night's Watch, haha, right? But like there's dudes there dressed as the Night's Watch. First of all, they don't need them.
Where did they come from?
Where'd they come? What? Yeah, sure. Where'd they come from? Why'd they go back to the Night's Watch after all this if they were from there originally? Secondly,
because all of the Night's Watch people were at Winterfell, why didn't they just stay there?
Yeah. Why do they need them? Thirdly, isn't that on the other side of the North, which is now an independent country?
Yep, it certainly is.
None of this makes sense.
So really, Tyrion's plan is actually more genius than I thought. He's literally just sending his refugees to the other country.
God,
it's terrible.
It's
he's like exiling the people they don't want to deal with to the country they don't like anymore because it broke off.
Yeah, Bran now, as king of the Six Kingdoms, has decided that since his sister betrayed him, he's going to send all his prisoners north.
Right? That's how I read it. And I was like, man, this is like a really mean thing to do to Sansa. They're just like filling the North with the people that are like rapists and murderers.
Oh my God.
It makes really big sense. Problem.
I just kept saying it over and over as we get the Jon. Like I'm sorry. I don't know if that got all muffled because I put my head in my hands for the rest of this episode.
I could hear it.
As we follow Jon's path for the rest of this, I just can't. I just can't.
So in context of the books, it makes a little more sense than it does in the context of the show, right? Because in the books, they always talk about the Night's Watch being the place that lords would send their bastard sons to get rid of them, and that lords would send their like third and fourth kids who they can't afford to give all their land and stuff to, right?
That doesn't apply to him anymore.
No, that's not the point. But in the context of why a Night's Watch needs to exist, that's the reason that the books give, and it makes quite a bit more sense in that context. Now, the show doesn't give any of that context here, and don't think is actually worried about that. They just wanted to give Jon Snow A to Z back to A arc. And so you get
that was
sad
a quick trip back
ride
from Z to A, by the way.
Right? Yeah, he gets to Z in episodes 8 or episode 6 here, and then is back to A at the end of episode 8.
Where do you buy his interactions with his family at the end here?
When? When they're like wishing him good luck on the dock
before he gets on the boat.
I think Jon is probably at peace with what he did. Like, he knew he did the right thing. I don't understand why he doesn't want to then like take the throne for himself since he is the rightful heir.
Yeah, but, so you've been led to believe Jon is the Ned Stark of this show now. He's the man that will
the right and honorable character doing the right thing.
And 3 members of his family stab him in the back, and they hug each other, and they're all being nice to him. Oh, you understand? This is the only way. Go back to the Night's Watch.
They sell it as the only way.
And it's like, the only one that I buy the interaction is with Arya, because Arya says she's leaving. And it's like, yeah, she would leave when her family does this to Jon.
Or like she was going to leave anyway, probably, I think. And her and Jon were always close, so he's actually saying goodbye to her.
Yeah.
Unlike Sansa, who he probably never wants to talk to again based on how she's treating him.
But how she treated him since she showed up and didn't tell him she had a second army showing up at the Battle of Bastards.
Right.
It's really sad because this is, again, there's a lot of stuff left out, and she is literally Catelyn Stark with how she treats Jon in the show.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I actually think the idea of Jon getting sent back to the Night's Watch is a good idea for an ending for him. Maybe in a world where like the army of the dead was beaten back but not destroyed.
Agreed.
But we're not in that world.
If the army of the dead was not defeated, or if there was some idea that
they're gone for now, but we can't be sure there aren't more of them,
right?
Because some children told Bran that they could come again in 8,000 years or something.
Or let's say killing the Night King didn't kill the whole army like it did at Winterfell. Like, they defeated that army and they killed the Night King, but there's still thousands of them, roaming around.
Or they see like one White Walker escapes and runs away back north.
That's something. It gives the Knights, But
then you could be like, okay.
I was thinking about it last night, and I thought there was only one other way that I could accept this. Is if Bran, and this feels real yucky, convinces people that Jon's not actually a good guy. Because you could paint him as Jon the Betrayer.
Certainly there are people that see him as that, right? All the Unsullied and,
But before that, you follow his arc. He is sent to the Night's Watch because he's a bastard.
Yep.
He betrays the Night's Watch, unbeknownst to most of the Night's Watch. He's working for the Night's Watch to go to the Wildlings.
Right.
He betrays the Wildlings
to go back to the Night's Watch.
He betrays the Night's Watch again when his family's in trouble.
And then to save the Wildlings, he betrays them again by letting them through the wall.
He gets killed.
for that betrayal.
Right. So then he goes and let's see, he betrays.
He gets resurrected and then decides he's done with it being in the Night's Watch.
He becomes king in the North.
Becomes king in the North, which is a betrayal of the crown.
Betrays the crown. Betrays the Northmen by bending the knee
to Daenerys. Mm-hmm.
Betrays Daenerys
by killing her.
By saying he's the king, and then
by telling people, and then again betrays her by stabbing her in the chest. Okay, you could have painted that story. They didn't do that though.
That's the only way I get. Like he needs to be imprisoned.
I think we have to make a political deal here to send Jon up north is a good idea. They just didn't sell it well. Like I actually thought the ending for him was fine. I don't know that I liked the sullen hero riding off into the sunset ending he got.
I just don't buy it.
It was a fine ending.
How did they not come up with a better solution for it? Because what keeps him up there the minute the Unsullied sail for Narth? I
mean, his duty, right? He is always the guy who's doing the right thing. And if Bran somehow convinces... Again, they don't do a good job of any of this. But I'm saying if Bran is somehow convinced Jon that, this is the only way this works, I think Jon would sit there and be mopey at the wall forever.
I 1,000% believe the ending. I 1,000% believe the ending where it's the Seven Kingdoms and Bran is king. I even 500% believe the ending where... it's the Five Kingdoms and a different king is king, and Pike and the North go off to do their own thing because that's what they do.
It would be the Four Kingdoms then, right?
No,
it's 6 and then
five because Pike and the North, right? Oh, maybe even the
I would say if the Iron Islands are leaving, then Dorne should leave too because they also.
And then you lose the Reach
crown.
Because Sansa's basically in charge of the Reach. Right?
Yeah, I don't know.
So I don't.
Edmure Tully's alive.
Look,
for some reason.
I believe the fracturing of the kingdom. Right? I believe that ending and Jon not becoming king. I don't believe what we got, and that's the problem that I have. Where there's two Starks in charge of two different countries, and the Stark that is the quote unquote best of them gets exiled.
I think this is the so one thing I want to touch on here at the very end is that you can definitely see touches of this is something George Martin would do.
Yes, absolutely.
The kind of the way that everyone dies in war and sucks for all the little people in King's Landing.
Right.
That's definitely a thing that would happen in the books, right?
So, absolutely.
And Jon not getting to be the hero of the story, even though he is very clearly laid out to be the hero of the story, is also something George Martin would do.
George Martin.
However,
let's talk about this for a second because it is a trope, a very common trope of his through these books, especially. Good men get trampled by history.
Absolutely.
100%. It starts with Ned Stark and it doesn't end there. And I mean, it even kind of starts with Robert Baratheon, right? He was kind of a good man and
he had good ideas. He had good intention. He had good intentions, but he actually killed Rhaegar for, it turns out, a completely wrong and bad idea.
Right. So good men get trampled by history is a George Martin thing, right? And I would believe him not getting the crown, even in the book. I feel like these books should have been laid out, right? And the Cliff Notes version has kind of, it's amazing, clipped the wings kind of these books that haven't even been released because in theory, this is how it ends.
I don't think even in theory. I'm relatively certain that most of this stuff is going to happen. Not maybe necessarily in this exact way because there are more pieces and a lot more plot lines going on, but I think kind of the big broad strokes are going to be there.
It's amazing to do this within
Landing.
Yeah.
And Jon is going to stab her in the heart for it, and then Jon is going to get sent back to the Night's Watch. I think that's all going to happen.
For Martin to have written a book where all the he's a good writer, and foreshadowing a bunch of stuff and having a prophecy and all this sort of things, and then things going out of order would not happen in his books. So something here is hinky in terms of the order of operations.
Yes, and so I think that is
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's the lack of characters.
Yeah.
I think it's 100% the lack of characters.
Not having those other characters. I think the thing that you will see in the books perhaps is going to be that other Aegon Targaryen, and it's not going to be Cersei that gets burnt there. It's going to be him and all the people that he has, sort of made love him in King's Landing.
Dany could die in the north.
Dany could die in the north. All of that King's Landing stuff could happen before the Winterfell stuff.
So there's a lot of that stuff that seems like it was plotted but not determined. And
right.
It's gonna be weird to do this, but if you don't want to hear this, skip ahead a minute. He has a blog post out now which basically answers this question. Is this how it ends? And it cryptically says yes and also no, right? Like there's too many things that are still open-ended in the books to say yes completely, but yes is the answer.
I mean, I think that he answers that cagely enough that you aren't all the way sure which thing they're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think he has himself said, and the showrunners also said this, that he gave them the cliff notes to the end game, like his planned ending for all the characters. So I think it's very, very likely that the broad strokes of what we saw here are the results we see in the book.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully, given that he is a good writer and has produced amazing pieces of fiction before, we will get a better lead up to those endings, and it will make a bunch more sense.
And there will be a lot of moving parts that will get you there without the theme of this last season, which I think
was like it was rushed, right?
No, you know what I think the theme... it's amazing to say this about a show that had the enormity of this budget. Massive, like unheard of budget. And
oh yeah, it approached like major motion picture level budget for a TV show is unheard of.
Yeah, what's her name? Plays Cersei.
Lena Headey.
Lena Headey was getting $1 million an episode, and you saw what she was doing for $1 million an episode.
Yeah, drinking wine and brooding.
Yeah. I want a companion shirt to I drink and I know things to be drinking wine and brooding.
Hey, yeah.
The theme that I saw at the end of this is that the problems they had at the beginning were the same problems they had at the end. They had to save money all the time. To do the things they needed to do, they just constantly were running up against money. And by the end, it's such a massive show, and their payroll is so huge, and their CG needs were so huge that I've never seen a show like this before. And I don't think we'll see one again. Yeah. And even then, it was not enough. They couldn't sustain to get the 15 episodes per season for season 7, season 8, and season 9 and 10,
needed, right?
Like they needed 2 more seasons.
Yeah. Or at least 1 more season of 10 episodes, right?
Something. They needed something.
I think you're right. And that's kind of like where I kind of want to end this here. I am not unhappy with the way all this resolved. I think it was fine. I think I'm disappointed that it was fine instead of being great like it could have been.
Yeah, I was definitely left with a, okay, it's over. Rather than wow, it's over. But I wasn't left with like, I'm so pissed off. I definitely
wasn't mad. I was like, okay.
I had to check myself for a couple days with the Jon Snow ending and try and make sure that I wasn't fanboying. You know what I mean? Like everyone fanboys a bit about a character or two, and they really push Jon on you on this show, and it was almost never going to be him as king.
Sure.
He didn't want it. Even if they handed it to him, I would have expected him to hand it to Sansa.
Or someone else, right?
Right.
It's the show does a good job of a lot of cases where people getting handed stuff that they don't want. They either find ways to turn it down or give it to someone else or whatever. So I think Jon being king would have been the least believable thing.
I'm glad we didn't walk into that. And it just leaves me he's beyond the wall doing whatever. And you can't be upset about that. But I feel like him getting there could have been a more organic choice of him saying, you know, my sister that I like is leaving. I don't want to be part of this anymore. I'm going north to...
Or, you know, maybe he decides that this is his penance for having killed the woman he loves, right? They could have sold it from that angle, but they didn't do that either.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like, oh, I can't live with myself for having done this to someone I love, even if it was the right thing. I deserve to be exiled. And then he exiles himself.
Yeah. So a lot of the time that we've talked about this, I think, is we're left with, could we have thought of an idea that made that fit better? And that is down to time.
If we had
it's
more time.
all about time. They came up against so many issues that they had to solve in 15 minutes, not in 5 episodes.
Or even in 1 episode, right? Like if a bunch of these endings, not even the endings, if a bunch of these issues we've had with the way things shook out were given an episode to themselves before the final confrontation, you could have bought it, right?
Yeah, easy.
But there wasn't enough screen time to do that. And so unfortunately, we got this. Again, you know, I still think it's a great show. And, you know, there's so much amazing stuff in the early seasons. And even the later seasons, there's good stuff in them too. I just, you know, I was underwhelmed with what should have been a really grand, magnificent ending. And it just was kind of like, okay.
I definitely was not underwhelmed by the scale that they put into these things. I definitely was impressed, especially by the cinematography used in the 2 big battles this season, of just how beautiful they were. I think writing wise, they ran on, and you were kind of like, oh my god, these are getting long.
Yeah.
But that's not the director's fault or anything like that. It's a matter of what they wanted to spend time on, and I think that I was impressed by that, but left with episode 6, you're kind of you're of all the things that we say cliff note about it, you're left literally with episode 6 being, like we said, the one-liner epilogue, basically.
Well, it was very hurriedly taking the broken pieces of a beautiful vase and sweeping them into a dustbin and putting the lid on the show.
Yep. Which is
all right.
It's a way to end it, but it's not maybe watching somebody blow glass and build a new vase.
Right. Well, I think that's kind of all we got to say on this. We talked quite a while here.
Yeah. Are you eagerly awaiting a book, or are you turned off of the books?
I'll read the books when they come out, if they come out.
Sure.
I think that's my opinion. I will read them if they come out. I don't know that they will.
Okay, we know people have Game of Thrones takes. We know the internet is hot with them. If you want to be... We weren't like overtly positive or anything on this, but we were not like targeting specific people and negative. So if you want to, if you want to be critical, where would people be critical, or tell us that we were too critical and that you liked some things that we didn't like?
You can send those takes over to our YouTube. We Were Gamers. Search that on YouTube, and we'll duke it out in the comment section there. Also, you can send emails to podcast@weweregamers.com, and we will read them and perhaps talk about them. We are on Instagram and Facebook at We Were Gamers. Check those out. Follow us on Twitter similarly, and subscribe to this podcast wherever fine podcasts are found.
Well, on to the next one. Hopefully there's a new... Are you going to watch the Aragorn series? Is that the new thing? Is that what we're going to do?
I don't know, man. There's that Watchmen series on HBO. Is that going to be good?
Pretty good. It looks good. Prequel thing?
I like the Watchmen. Or is it a post-quel?
Is it a post-quel or a sequel? Or
I can't tell.